Hey everybody, welcome to Money's No Object. I'm your host, Dylan Howell. This is episode number 337 of our YouTube channel and podcast, and I could not be more excited to continue sharing with you guys personal finance topics that I think could be useful for you in your long-term financial journey. Today, we are going to be talking about cheap financing, and this is something that I think we all can be enticed by. It's something that can catch anybody's eye, but I'm going to talk about why even cheap financing for assets that, hey, debt seems pretty normal for, is still a bad idea, right? And some of you I may not be able to pull to the other side, and I may not be able to convince that it is a bad idea, but ultimately, if debt is a strain on your cash flow, then we are going to need to keep from it and avoid it at all costs. And this cheaper financing is ultimately just a way that lenders are trying to entice you to get on the wrong side of your financial life. So stick around for a discussion of all that and more in today's episode. Before we get started, though, if you could go down below, hit the big red subscribe button, like this video, leave me any feedback in the comments down below, and I'll be sure to respond to anything you leave down there. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify podcasts, be sure to subscribe and leave me a review on either one of those platforms. Follow me on social media at MNO with Dylan, and that's really good supplemental materials to all the things I'm putting out in these long-form episodes on YouTube and the podcast every single day. And that if you need somebody to help you to build a financial plan and keep you accountable to that plan over the long term, then I can do that. Just DM me on any of the major social media sites and tell me that you are interested in financial coaching sessions, and you and I can begin working together, pushing towards your long-term financial goals and ultimately pushing you on towards long-term financial freedom, which is what I hope for every single individual who's watching or listening to this show on a day-to-day basis. Now, just a simple disclaimer before we start this episode. The simple disclaimer is this. I don't have any debt, okay? You could look and you could see if I had any debt, but I don't. The closest thing to having any debt that me and my wife have is, credit cards that we continuously purchase things on month after month and then continuously pay them off in full every single month. That's the closest thing we have to debt, just because that is a debt instrument, but we do not carry a debt balance. We do not carry a balance on those credit cards because that'd be a bad idea, right? Those are high interest rate debts, right? Credit cards are. Why would you ever want to hold a balance on a high interest rate debt? You don't want to, right? So ultimately, we stay away from that. We get everything paid off. The reason that I provide a disclaimer that says I have no debt is because you may think that, somebody that is saying, hey, stay away from, low interest financing or stay away from cheap debt is somebody who is, here with an agenda, right? They have some agenda that, maybe they, take out this type of debt themselves, or maybe they do something themselves and they're hypocritical or whatever. No, this is something that I apply to my own financial life. It's something that I myself do, right? And I'm not saying I expect you to be just like me. I'm just here telling you every day what works best for me. And what works best for me and what I think is the best way to get to long-term financial freedom is to not have any debt, is to be debt-free, is to have cash flow available to myself to make decisions with week after week, month after month, whatever it may be. And the only way that this is the case is if I have no debt. Now, the biggest place, in my opinion, that this shows up, this problem of low interest financing, and yes, I call it a problem. And I don't call it a problem because I think it is mathematically incorrect. I understand math, okay? I understand that if I can take out a 2% mortgage, right, over a long period of time, that is a cheap mortgage rate. Right? If I can take out a 2% mortgage and I can ultimately invest my money making, 7, 8, 9, 10%, it's a no-brainer, right? You make more in your investments. And so why would you not just continue to, just make a mortgage payment, not put anything extra on the mortgage and put any extra money into an investment? Sounds completely logical, right? Well, not necessarily. Okay. Again, I agree with the math, and if it works for you over a long period of time, I'm not going to be mad at you. Okay. But here's where I have a problem with it because of my risk tolerance and because of the way I think about money. Debt is a strain on your cash flow, right? Debt keeps you from having as much cash as you would have otherwise, right? And you can choose to use that cash to invest, okay? But the longer you have a debt hanging around your neck, the longer you have an obligation, right? Because in that case where you take out low interest rate mortgage debt and then you're investing any extra cash that you have and making some type of difference on that cash, right? You basically have this decision, and this decision is, do I continue having this debt or do I not continue to have this debt, right? And I mean, there are a couple other decisions there, right? Do I grow my money at a higher rate or do I not grow my money at such a high rate? Because ultimately, if you're paying off the mortgage, then you are making, that 2% on that money. Which was not a lot, right? It's not a lot to be making on, especially a large sum of money like you would have with a mortgage. But at the same time, think about this. Say you do pay off your mortgage. Let's say your mortgage payment every month was, I don't know, $2,000, $1,500, whatever, right? That's very likely your largest monthly expense. And so if you got rid of your largest monthly expense, what would happen, right? How much more cash flow would you ultimately have at your discretion? The answer is a lot, right? Now, I'm not suggesting that we don't invest until we've got our mortgage paid off. I don't think that is prudent either. I'm just saying that if we can get that debt off of our backs, right, even a low rate, relatively low risk debt like a mortgage, then we have more cash flow free. We don't have any type of burden on us as far as having to make this large payment. And then we can invest very aggressively on the other side of not having that payment. Yes, I want you investing aggressively while you still have that payment, but all the more once that payment is no longer with us. Because once that payment is no longer with us, you free up that big amount of cash flow that you can give, save, or spend at your own discretion. So instead of being forced into making some payment and then deciding what to do with cash flow that's left over, ultimately, you have this decision where you're like, okay, I can, get rid of this payment, and then I have more cash flow that I can make a decision on later on. Now, is it without a doubt that debt makes things grow faster? Sure, right? Because just like that example I just gave, right, you would invest money that you would not have otherwise invested at higher rates. I get it, right? You would make more money by investing using that debt, using that mortgage debt than otherwise, okay? And that is if things go the way that you want them to go. The problem here is risk, right? And this is why I said my risk profile makes it to where I'm not going to do this, and I don't suggest that you do so either. Because I feel as if there is real risk to keeping debt around when I don't have to, right? I think that there is real risk in keeping a debt around that can easily be paid off in some period of time. I think more than anything, the reason that people don't pay off their mortgage is not so they can just make this difference on the mortgage. I think that's a good logical answer. I think that's a good mathematical answer. But I think ultimately it's that the mortgage debt is a large debt. And I think it's daunting to a lot of people, and it's daunting to look at it and go, I'm going to get that thing paid off, right? So people think they can't do it, or that they, don't want to put in the effort to try to do something like that. So they're like, you know what? I'll just make this argument. And again, the argument is not an illogical one, but this argument is not taking into account the fact that there's risk associated with keeping a mortgage around over a long period of time. Okay, just think if something big comes up in your life, and I'm saying something big, right? And something that's going to force you into debt otherwise, right? Even if you have an emergency fund, even if you're sitting there and you don't have any other debts other than your mortgage, right? How much more would you be able to take care of whatever that thing is if you didn't have a mortgage sitting around, right? Now, again, I'm not trying to scare you into not having a mortgage. I'm just saying that this idea that we should just keep as much low rate debt as possible is not a good idea. We are not corporations, okay? For corporations, there is this disconnect. And this disconnect is between the ownership of the corporation and the actual managers of the corporation, right? And the ownership of the corporation and the liability associated with the management of the corporation, right? Because with a corporation, it's very common that taking out debt is something that they do, right? Taking out debt is something that they're very, very used to. And that's fine, right? Taking out debt is something that happens all the time, even with individuals, right? But with a corporation, if you take out debt as the CEO of a corporation, right, you are shielded from the fact that you took that debt out. You have no personal obligation to pay that debt, okay? Unless you're in a company that is a sole proprietorship, but any other type of corporate organization, right? Any other type of limited liability company, and you are going to have less liability on the personal side. And then if it's a corporation, you're going to have no liability on the personal side. You will not have a liability to pay those debts. But as an individual, right? If we take out a bunch of low rate debt and then can't make the payments, then who's at fault? Who's got to come up with the money? Well, you do. Okay, so we have this feeling for some reason that it's equivalent to look at us and look at companies, and it's equivalent to look at us and look at these CEOs that are taking out a bunch of debt in their company. It's a different thing. Now, I'm not saying if you run a company you should take out as much debt as possible. That's not necessarily what I'm saying, right? But debt financing is cheap, and if you can take no liability for the fact that you took out that debt and just manage it over time, I don't see anything wrong with that relative to the 100% liability that you're taking if you continuously take out a bunch of debt in your own name, right? You are taking on all the liability of that, debt, of the potential for default, of the potential that you end up not paying on that debt at some point, and that is going to be a problem for you. Now, that can be low rate debt or high rate debt, but debt nonetheless. Now, if there's any argument to be made about taking out low rate debt, in my opinion, it is the mortgage debt, right? Now, taking it out is one thing, but keeping it around is another, okay? That's why I kind of addressed just keeping it around. But the type of debt that I think is just reprehensible and offers a lot of low rate debt, offers a lot of debt that sounds really, really attractive, is auto loans, right? Is auto debt. Because the reason I think this is reprehensible is because this type of debt is on an asset that is going down in value. Overall, your home is going to go up in value. Okay, so not only are you paying this debt that is low rate, and maybe you can invest the difference or whatever, invest your excess cash, but at the same time that asset is going up in value, and so you're paying a smaller debt than the actual value of the asset. Okay, doesn't make it right to keep around forever, but makes me willing to say, hey, go ahead and take out a mortgage, right? But again, I'm not wanting to keep a mortgage around forever. But with an auto loan, you have an asset that is going down in value, right? As soon as you drive it off the lot, it is going down in value. Now, you may say, well, Dylan, what about used car prices right now? My car actually went up in value. Well, COVID's not going to happen every year either. And these supply chain issues with semiconductors is not going to happen on a continued basis over a long period of time. If you take advantage of this in the short term and sell your car for more than what it's actually worth, and you benefit from this, then fantastic, right? But it still doesn't warrant you taking out a loan on your vehicle, right? Because ultimately your vehicle is only going to go down in value over the long term, right? In 10 years from now, I promise you, whatever you're currently driving will be worth substantially less than it's worth today, right? I would even posit 2 years from now, 3 years from now, right? Typically, I would say, 1 month from now. But again, we have these supply chain issues where the prices of used cars are just, blowing up. So I'm not saying that will persist because I don't think it will, but it is something that we're dealing with right now. But it is not a reason to take out, car loans. And one of the big things on car loans is what? 0% financing, right? We can put zero down, 0% for X amount of months or whatever, right? But again, even 0% financing is not what we want. And you may say, well, 0% financing sounds great, right? I can go and I don't have to pay any interest, and I just, make equivalent monthly payments, and I just spread out this money over time. I can invest the difference. I can invest the excess cash, all these types of things, right? Well, wrong. Because with 0% financing, the problem is that the price that you are paying, it is, representative of whatever you're paying for, right? It's representative of the fact that you would have otherwise financed that asset, right? They are baking in some interest rate already. So even though it's a 0% deal, right, you're likely looking at a situation where you can't take advantage of any type of sale. You're not really able to negotiate, and the interest rate is already priced in. Not to mention, when it's 0%, you have this thought process that it's 0%, and you're likely to overspend. You're likely to pay more for a vehicle than you would have otherwise, right? Which again makes it a bad idea. And then something that we like to do with car debt for some reason is spread it out as long as possible. People get 7-year car loans. I'm like, do you know how many miles you put on a car? Do you know how much a car depreciates over a 7-year period? I'll tell you, it's a lot, right? It's a lot. The amount of wear and tear and depreciation and issues that a car can have over a 7-year period or an 8-year period even is very, very substantial. So the fact that you would still be paying on that debt just doesn't make any sense at all to me, right? So even if you have a low rate, even if you can get 0% financing, car loans are a bad idea, and they are especially a strain on your cash flow because not only are you making these payments, but that asset is going down in value for you. So your net worth is constantly dwindling while you have a vehicle that is financed. Okay, so just say no to that as well. Now, there is a place that, again, I use a particular debt instrument. I use a credit card, right? Now, I don't use it as debt because I don't keep a balance and I don't incur interest, okay? But something that, a lot of people get drawn in by is 0% and, 0% promotional periods on credit cards, right? Or they'll negotiate down a 0% rate for some period of time on their credit card. And, in essence, this doesn't sound like a big deal, right? This sounds like something that's like, oh, well, you got 0%. Very good. Well, the problem is this, is that in the same way where we hear we're getting 0% financing at a car lot and we overspend, right? We like to overspend when we get 0% loans, period, right? And if you have 0% on a credit card, you're likely to overspend as well. Okay, so that 0% is going to force you into a place where you're likely spending more money than you would have otherwise. And if you're spending more money than you would have otherwise, then you may get to a point with that credit card over that promotional period where you can't actually pay it off in the way that you want to, right? The credit card company is betting on your behavior. They're betting on the fact that if they offer you a lower rate, that you're going to take it, one, or if they offer you 0%, you're going to take it because, who doesn't love quote unquote free, right? But they know that you're likely to overspend. You're likely to end up holding a balance. And guess what? If you hold a balance after that 0% promotional period, what's going to happen? You're going to start incurring interest, right? So this is going to be a place in your financial life where they get to pull you from the place where you are not in debt at all, and you are being responsible with a credit card or being responsible with your finances, and pull you into debt because they know your behavior, right? This is why I don't care to take advantage of any 0% promotional periods, right? If my credit cards offer me that, I just say no, because ultimately What am I doing every month? I'm paying it off every single month. I'm using it as an extension of my bank account. And if you're not using a credit card like that, you are ultimately going to have problems, or it's very, very likely that you will have problems. Because again, credit card companies, they bet on consumer behavior. And how do you think they know consumer behavior? Because they've observed it. They know the data. They know what you're going to do, on average, right? They know what your demographic is. And so, we need to stay away from this 0%, lie, both for car loans and then this 0% lie for credit cards, because that 0% lie for credit cards is going to just push us into a place where we could very likely go into debt, or very likely get comfortable with debt. And debt never needs to be a place that we are extremely comfortable. Okay. So why at the end of the day do I look up and go, hey, debt's just a bad idea. I just don't like debt, right? Even if you make a mathematical argument, if you make a logical argument, I don't like debt. Like I said earlier, it's a risk thing for me, right? It has to do with, hey, I owe someone something and I don't like it, right? I don't like the fact that I owe someone something. And I know the way that I feel not owing anyone anything. Right. And that's why when I, put together the financial action plan, I make it to where you would get out of debt. You would get out of consumer debt, because I know the way that I feel not owing anyone money. And I know the primary things that are holding individuals back, right? We can make these nuanced arguments. We can make these nuanced arguments about low rate debt. We can make these nuanced arguments about, 0% or whatever, right? Or mortgage debt or whatever it is. But ultimately, the problem is not these nuanced conversations. The problem is that most of you out there have student loans, right? The problem is that most of you out there do have car loans that are eating you alive. Most of you out there, do have credit card debt at not 0%, at a high rate, right? And these things are problems. These things are big issues in your life, especially the student loan thing. They are big issues in your life. And I know that the best prescription for that is to tell you, hey, get out of debt, stay out of debt. Don't borrow money. Don't, even if it's attractive looking financing, don't go back into it, because we get these behaviors, right? We have a pattern of behaviors ultimately that we represent in our lives. And the pattern of behavior of taking out debt is something that can continue very easily, right? A lot of people, they'll find out, it's just, 72 easy payments of, $199 or whatever, right? And it seems very cheap on a month-to-month basis. But you get a bunch of debts in the same way that, if you have a bunch of subscriptions month-to-month, right? Those things add up, right? The cost of these things add up. And if you are constantly taking out more and more debt, the cost of that debt ends up adding up, and it ends up being debilitating. You don't have any freedom. You don't have the ability to choose where your money goes anymore. You are forced into paying whomever it is, whatever company it is, month after month after month. And it's not where I want you to be. I want you to have freedom. I want you to have the ability to choose where your money goes. Okay. And you will never have that freedom if you continuously stay in debt. Okay. Now, some of you may be comfortable with debt, and I mean, I'm still talking to you, and I still hope to, pull you to the other side. I still hope to pull you to the side that says that, debt is ultimately not a good idea, because I feel like many of you are going to come to some reckoning in your life where, debt will be a problem, right? Debt will be your issue, and yet you're not addressing it head on in the way that you should. Just think about what life would be like. I know that we've been in this weird period where you haven't had to make student loan payments and all these types of things, but think about what it would look like in your life if you didn't have student loans. Or think about what it would look like in your life if you didn't have that credit card hanging over your head, right? Think about what it would look like in your life if you didn't owe anything on your car. Or cars, right? For a lot of people, it's cars. And again, just crazy the amount of money that individuals spend on cars. Somebody recently was talking to them, and they told me that they have, between them and their kids, have 3 or 4 cars and their total payments on those cars is over $1,000 a month. And I'm like, over $1,000 a month. And some of you may say, well, I've got, a truck, and just the payment on that truck's $800 a month. Yeah, you're just as ridiculous, if not more ridiculous, right, for that. But can you imagine if you're in that position and you get that $1,000 a month back, right? Meaning you have the ability to choose where that $1,000 a month goes. You go from being, pretty broke at the end of the month to actually having some substantial money that you can invest for your future, that you can, give, that you can, spend on yourself and your family. A lot of you think that I'm getting you out of debt so we can just invest. That's not the case. I want you to enjoy your money. I want you to do things with your money that's fun, that's enjoyable, that will allow you to, be free, not just in a financial sense, but in an adventurous life living sense, right? So, look, I am not going into debt. You can write that down, unless something just drastic happens, which in that case, what do we have? We have an emergency fund. But again, if it's something even past the emergency fund, it would have to be something extremely drastic to put me into debt. Otherwise, I'm not going into debt. Otherwise, me and my wife are going to stay in this place where we have the choice of where our cash flow goes, right? And if that costs me a few percent in returns over a long period of time, or a little bit of return on my money over time, then so be it, right? But what it's not going to cost me, right, is peace of mind, right? I will have peace of mind. I will have the peace of mind knowing that I don't owe anybody anything. I'll have the peace of mind knowing that I don't have to, answer to any company that, it has offered me financing and I took it, and, now they're wondering where their money is and I can't make the payment. I don't have to deal with that situation ever in my life. And I'm just saying, if you yearn for that, you yearn for not being, harassed by creditors and not being harassed by those who you owe money to, doesn't this sound, attractive? Doesn't this sound like something that is interesting and that will actually help you to live a better life, to live a freer life? And ultimately, that's all I want for you guys. I want you guys to live a free life. I want you to have the choices with your money, and I want you to do what's best for you, right? And if you're smarter than the system and you're smarter than me, and you're just going to continue, making your mortgage payment and investing your excess cash, then look, I'm not going to sit here and be mad at you, right? If you're going to continue to, finance vehicles over a long period of time, because why would you spend that much money all at once on a depreciating asset or whatever, right? So be it, right? If that's going to be your mindset, then so be it, right? But I want you to know that if tragedy hits your life, right, and you need excess cash, you're not going to have it, right? You may have an emergency fund, and that's great, right? But I'll say that most people that have a fair amount of debt or a lot of debt don't have emergency funds, which is a problem, right? So nonetheless, look, I want you all to succeed. I want you to succeed in the way that works for you. But I know what works for me. I know that if you take away the risk of debt, you take away the risk of owing somebody money, then you also take away the risk of your financial life crumbling down. Because ultimately, who's ever filed bankruptcy when they didn't have debt? No one. Who's ever been foreclosed upon when they didn't have a mortgage? No one. Right? So you take risks away from your life financially, and things can be so much freer. And that's what I hope for you. And that's why I'm here, trying to teach you, trying to convince you that this should be your path each and every day on this show. So thanks for watching this video. If you could go down below, hit the big red subscribe button, like this video, leave me any feedback in the comments down below, and I'll be sure to respond to anything you leave down there. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify podcasts, be sure to subscribe and leave me a review on either one of those platforms. Follow me on social media at MNO with Dylan, and that's really good supplemental materials to all the things I'm putting out in these long form episodes on YouTube and the podcast every single day. And then if you need somebody to help you to build a financial plan and keep you accountable to that plan over the long term, then I can do that. Just DM me on any of the major social media sites and tell me that you are interested in financial coaching sessions. And you and I can begin working together, pushing towards your long-term financial goals and ultimately pushing you on towards long-term financial freedom, which is what I hope for every single individual who's watching or listening to this show on a day-to-day basis. So tune in tomorrow as I continue talking about personal finance topics that I think can be useful for you in your long-term financial journey. So thanks for tuning in to this episode of Money's No Object. I'm your host, Dylan Howell. God bless.